So for those who want to chat or talk to me, you can't do it on the audio, but you can do it through the chat box. But if you don't have access to Zoom, we're also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, I believe. I'll check with my technical team if we're actually live streaming yet, but we should be shortly. All of these courses are recorded and published on YouTube. So if you forget something, you meant to take notes, you don't remember something clearly, you can watch it on our channel. So our YouTube channel is linked here in red, American Institute-DZ. And that is basically everything. That is the course. We have a few rules to participate because everything wonderful in life has to come with some guidelines to make sure that we both, or I should say, we all enjoy this. There's really three main rules. I used to go into much more detail for my previous classes, but essentially all the rules I want to say fall into one of these categories. Number one is stay appropriate. We really are here to learn English. In this case, we're here to learn how to apply to jobs in English, and that's what we're going to be chatting about. I do see the chat, and so if I see that it's kind of talking about something different or someone is sending links and things, we may have to kindly escort you out of the Zoom. So let's stay appropriate in the chat, as well as stay on topic. Those things both go together. Under stay appropriate, also, I hope you would expect that even though this is an online program, it's still a learning environment. So no swearing, please, nothing inappropriate. We don't have age limitations here, so we need to make sure it's appropriate for all ages and the content stays professional. And then the last thing is, please participate. This is not simply a program where you listen to me and you take notes. I hope you actually ask your questions in the chat. You see how what I'm saying applies to your case. If you don't understand something, you write it in the Q&A section. So basically, there's two ways to participate. The first is through writing in the chat. The second is actually submitting a question. You can see in the Zoom, there's something called Q&A, or on the French Zoom, it says Q and R for question and réponse. And so I'll check here regularly to see if we have any relevant questions. I do see a few questions coming in about certificates. Unfortunately, there are no certificates for this class because we don't track who attends. It's an open Zoom, so you can come for 3 minutes or you can come for an hour and a half. My hope is that you come to benefit for your own personal education and growth. But we don't have certificates for this class, and it's a really free and open course for everyone. I should say, actually, before we continue, that this is the third online class series that we're doing. And I have had people come up to me, either they come to the school and they see me in the hallway, or they see me at an event and they say, Ariella, you were my teacher. And I have a moment of panic thinking, oh my gosh, I don't remember them. I don't remember their face, but they were a student in an online Zoom class. And I just felt so touched that in this setting, still my students feel so connected to me. And so if you guys ever see me after you attend one of these classes, I hope you come up and introduce yourselves as a student, even if I don't know the faces and the usernames are maybe not the real names, etc. Just introduce yourself to me. Tell me what class you attended. Tell me what you liked or didn't like about it. And that would be, it's always such a pleasure for me to meet you guys. Okay, so now we go into the course. We are at 7:12. That's pretty short for me for introduction. Sometimes I can really talk. We're going to start going through resumes. So I have to tell you that it is possible to do a full 6-week course just on resume writing. I mean, it is, some would say a science, writing a resume. Some would say an art. And there's a lot of there's attention to a lot of different detail that you can spend more than just 1 hour learning how to write a resume. But for us, the goal of the course in February is to prepare you to apply to jobs across everything. So that's resume, cover letter, interview, negotiation, networking. So we only have one class for resume. So I'm telling you this now so you know that you might leave this class feeling like, I think I still want to spend more time. I want to research more. That's great. What I hope is it gives you enough information to feel empowered to know what information more do you need. You can send me questions if there's anything we don't get to go over in detail. And also there's so many amazing online resources about resumes as well. All right, so anatomy as a resume, we're going to go over first. This is our table of contents for today. We'll talk about tailoring your resume to the job you want. how you can highlight your skills and achievements, some do's and don'ts, and then we're going into Q&A, at which case I'd love for you guys. I see that some of you are already raising your hand. Please continue using that feature. And in the Q&A section, I'll be able to call on you guys, and you can even join with audio. For now, we're not going to do audio. We'll save it till the end. And then we have some resources for you about how to write amazing CVs. Before we go into this, I'm hoping my secret assistant, who is not also Ariella Knight, but is named Kenza, can launch the poll. Kenza, can you start the poll, please? We will see when our poll begins. I don't think I have the ability to start. Oh, actually, I think I have. Oh, it's here. Thank you. All right, guys, I have a bunch of questions for you. And by a bunch, I mean 4. There's no right answer. This is just me understanding a little bit about who is in the room with me right now. So the first one is, have you ever written a CV in English? I don't mean a CV ever. I mean a CV in English. Have you ever written a CV in English? Have you ever applied to a job in English? Then I'm kind of checking in on your confidence. How confident are you about how to write a good English resume? And then lastly, what's the hardest part? So I'm going to give everyone about a minute to complete the poll. Very interesting to see everything coming in. I'm just reading. I'm taking the moment to read the discussion, you guys. Again, there's no certificates here because we don't track kind of who's attending, but I really recommend that you get the value out of it regardless. Yasmin, you're asking if we will learn to write cover letters. That is next week. Next week is all cover letters. It's on Monday. It's our Monday session. For Sarah, who's interested in applying for research positions, I hope this will benefit you because you will need a strong application package for research. Whether you want to go to a university or a company, you will need a very high quality application with your resume, with a cover letter, and ideally, I would also recommend networking even before you apply. And okay, I think everyone has basically finished with our poll. All right, I'm going to put an end to it, and I think it's going to let me share the results. I hope it does. So let's see who we have with us. Can you guys see the results of the poll? Yes, perfect. Okay. So 58% of you have already written a CV in English before, and 42% of you have not, and this is going to be the first time. Let's see, almost exactly half of you have applied to a job in English before. This is interesting to me because if you have applied to a job in English, you should have written an English resume. That's going to be one of the first things that I tell you is always match the language that the job wants you to perform in on your resume. So we have 50% have applied to jobs in English. And then the next question is about confidence. How confident are you about how to write a good resume? 5, let's say if you marked the option 5, you were very confident, and we only have one single person who said very confident. But we also only had a few people who are really not confident. So most of you guys are kind of in the middle. What is the hardest part of writing a resume? So for this, I gave you 4 choices. Number 1 is knowing what to say, which is how do I put my what experience is relevant to bring to the resume? What should I mention? What content needs to go in there? And about 30% of you said that this was the hardest part. 60% said finding the right words. And to be honest, this is probably where I would have voted as well, which is how do I make my experience relevant? How do I market myself with that really eloquent and interesting vocabulary to make the HR manager pick my resume out of a pile? And then 40% said not having enough experience. So that's definitely for our new graduates or our young professionals who are going for their first job. And you feel like, what resume? What do I even put on this? And then 34% have the opposite problem, which is how do I fit all of my experience in only one page? So those are perhaps, those of us in our 30s who have at least a decade experience, and you think, how can I triage? What do I highlight? I have so much, but I don't want to lose the motivation of the employer. So thank you so much, you guys. This helps me because now I know who I'm talking to. I think we have a really nice younger professionals, more experienced professionals. Like a lot of you have applied to jobs in English, some of you have not. So I hope that the information I'm going to give you is hitting exactly at the level you need. All right, so let's see, because I see people telling me they sent questions in Q&A, which is fair because I did tell you this questions in Q&A. So I'm going to get into let's see. Yassine is telling me that they're using AI to go through resumes. Yes, they are. Yassine, remind me to mention this when we go to section 3 about highlighting key skills, because I have a strategy that can help. It's not 100% guarantee because AI is definitely changing the game, but it is something that can help you increase your chances of getting through. Salman wants to know, where can we contact you? Salman, we have at the American Institute, this is the school I founded, you're going to find our contact info on the last slide. So unfortunately, you're going to have to stay for the whole class to get the contact info. That's a joke because I think it will be wonderful to have you all here for the whole class. Let's see. Labri Sharifa says, I have so many certificates. How do I add them? Thank you. I'm also going to be talking about that. So I'm going to save that coming up. How can AI help us develop resumes? I know you guys are thinking Ariel is not actually answering questions. She's just reading them because I want to answer them in the course of this presentation. All right, cool. I'm going to come back to the questions at the end because I think most of them I'm covering in the presentation, and then you call me out if I missed one. Let's go ahead. Oh, seeing some of you can't hear me very well. Can I get a thumbs up if you're still with me? If you hear me okay? A few thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. Maybe there was a connection problem a second ago. Let me know if it's coming up again. Awesome. All right, let's get started. Okay. Oh, this was the polls page. Sorry, Kinza. I went early on my polls. All right, this is my first question for you, and I want the answers in the chat. And if you have done this with me before, you will know the answer because I always have to start with this question. It's just foundational. What is the difference between a CV and a resume? Send me in the chat. It's totally fine if you don't know, you can guess. I see there's no difference. It's the same. There is none. Someone says, I studied and I forgot. That's fair. I studied a lot of things I forgot. It's the same. CV French, resume in English. A resume is more specific than a CV. The CV presents a full history of your academic credentials, so the length of the document is variable. In contrast, a resume presents a concise picture of your skills and qualifications for a specific position. A resume is a paragraph. A resume is a 1 to 2 page document presenting key facts about your professional experience. A CV is a longer document for the whole career. Same thing, no difference. Okay, so here's what I always say, which frustrates people, is that this is a trick question and you guys got it right. Basically, there are 2 right answers. And it's the kind of thing that until you start seeing this or you're living in a country where you're hearing the difference, you're going to understand why there are 2 different ones. The first answer is about the slight difference that exists. So for those who put in the chat that a CV is longer, it's more detailed, it has your whole career, resume is shorter, resume is only 1 page. In a sense, that is accurate. That is what the old definition of a CV used to be. So when I was growing up, when I started applying to jobs, a CV was definitely a document that was much longer. We did associate it with being international, being European, being French. I saw someone say a CV is French. There in the US, we definitely felt like this was a document that someone with a 10-year or a 20-year career would use. And a resume was for those of us at the beginning of our careers who only had one page. However, over time, the sort of business culture has shifted to the point that we now talk about resumes and CVs interchangeably. So you guys understood the trick immediately. Everyone in the chat said there's no difference. It's the same. I don't think it matters. Nowadays, it doesn't matter. You can say resume and you can say CV, and we can be referring to the same document. In fact, you will even find in my presentation that at times I say resume and at times I say CV. I generally stick to the rule that a resume and a CV should be only one page. This is, for me, the golden standard of making sure that you demonstrate to your future employer that you can limit your experiences to a page, meaning you only choose what's relevant. It doesn't mean you don't have experience. It means you understand how to highlight your relevant experience, tailored specifically for their job. So for me, if I send someone 5 or 6 pages of everything I've ever done, I'm asking them to sort through all my experiences to find what's relevant. It doesn't look as impressive as it appears unedited or unstrategic. That being said, there are still a few industries where a multiple page CV is considered acceptable, primarily academia. So if you are interested in going and becoming a professor, this is still normal that you would have more than one page. But for the sake of this presentation and for the majority of you out there, sticking to that one-page resume, that one-page CV is going to do the trick. All right, what is the purpose of a resume? Why do we make them? Tell me in the chat. What's the point? Why don't we just stop doing resumes altogether? Okay, to get a job, to present our skills, to highlight skills, talk about experiences, to get jobs. But I guess my question is, why does an HR manager request a resume? What purpose does this serve? Okay, I see someone saying to get quick seen. I like this. It's not exactly correct English, quick seen, but it means, I think I understand the point, which is a tool that a hiring manager can use to quickly see if you have a profile that's interesting for them. I see someone else saying a concise summary. Yep, Dua here is saying to save time and efforts. Exactly. Imagine they have 100 people apply. They don't have time to interview 100 people. And then the rest of you, exactly. The point of a resume is to show your abilities, to present short details, to stand out from other candidates, to help employers make hiring decisions. Very good. So I put 2 things here. The resume has 2 main goals. Number 1 is to summarize your profile for a job. And the important word in the sentence is to summarize, meaning to make short, to pull out only the most relevant details related to a specific job. And the profile should include your skills, your education, and your previous jobs. This, for me, is the shortest, fastest way to say, why do we submit resumes? The next is to demonstrate you're qualified for a specific role. These go together. I mean, summarizing your profile for a job, it should be a profile that demonstrates qualification. But I wanted to mention it twice because, or not twice, I wanted to highlight the fact that a resume should demonstrate qualifications. Sometimes I think we're so focused on creating a piece of paper that has our full career that we forget that each job only wants to know what parts of your career make you a good fit for me. Okay, you're applying to work as a front desk at a hotel. I love that you did volunteering for youth, or I love that you worked as an engineer. But unless you can show me why those are relevant, maybe let's pick the jobs that show that you had customer service and retail experience. So it is a strategic summary of your profile, demonstrating qualification for a specific job. Here's an example of a resume. This is not a resume I love. It is not a resume I hate. I just wanted to make sure at this point that we are actually all on the same page and understanding what we're talking about. It is a one-page document. Usually it's black and white. Nowadays, I see there's lots of colors happening. I do accept colors, although typically I do prefer just a simple, plain black and white. We can discuss photos, no photos. The quick and fast rule is European resumes have photos, American resumes do not. Algerian resumes, I think, tend to have photos, but if you're applying for a job with an American company in Algeria, I recommend you don't have a photo. You can see that we have a couple of different sections here. So at the very top, we have contact information. This is zoomed in. I realize it's a little bit blurry. We have contact information. This is extremely important. Okay, you need to have your address. You need to have your phone number. You need to have your email. And I would also recommend having your LinkedIn. If you have an amazing profile, you want to make sure the person who reads your resume, imagine they print it out, they give it to their boss. So their boss wasn't on the email that you applied with. They need to be able to reach you quickly. And then we have education, skills, references, and on the right, you're seeing just the types of jobs that this person was doing. Okay. This was supposed to be animated, so you didn't see the answer, but I realized you're just going to see the answer. So I'm going to hold it here. Guys, tell me, what are the sections that we need to have on a resume? And what are the sections that we can have on a resume that are optional? If you got a sneak peek at the slide, great, you have an advantage. But tell me, I have, I believe, 6 required sections on any resume. And then I'm going to come answer in the chat. I see we have a lot of questions about CVs and colors. But tell me, what are the required sections? Education is required. Good. Aisha, good. Experience is required. Good. I saw, oh, you guys are great. Thank you for participating. They're coming in so fast. Okay, I see people saying email address and then Asma saying personal information. I call this contact details. It should include all the things I mentioned. It should include the email. It should include the address, the phone number, the LinkedIn, etc. So that's one section, contact details, education, work experience. Skills, very good. What kind of things do we include in a skills section? Can someone tell me what is a skill that we would list? Okay, Faraz is saying soft and hard skills. Great. Give me some examples. Ali is saying design. Good. Languages, exactly. This is what I was hoping for. The very first thing you should be listing in a resume for today's international world are going to be your language competencies. You're listing your language as well as your quality, your level in that language. If you're advanced, if you're intermediate, if you're beginner. I also see people talking about communication skills, time management, public speaking. Okay, I accept these, but for me, that's what the cover letter is for, is to explain how you have soft skills. What's most important in the skill section are going to be hard skills. That's languages. That's design. I saw someone mention design. Let's say you know how to use Adobe Illustrator. Let's say that you're very proficient in video editing. This also includes Microsoft Word. So if you have experience using Excel, PowerPoint, the whole Word suite, this is where you can talk about being, I don't know if you can say you're a master of Google Suite, but it's where you mention the types of programs that you know how to use. And if there's any coders in here, you can come up with examples much better than I can about what those programs are called. Like Python, coding languages, that's all I know, as well as languages. So you can add soft skills. And I see a couple people saying hobbies, you can add these, but I do not consider these required. These are additional kind of fun things if you have extra space. All right, I'm going to go back to the section where we were talking about the overall categories because I saw one I wanted to highlight and it was certificates. I think someone wrote certificates, someone else wrote accreditation. This is a non-required section, but it's definitely one that you can include if you have certificates. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the slide that was supposed to release slowly, but it didn't. Okay, so number 1, we have contact information. These are the key components to a resume. You need the contact information, non-negotiable. Professional summary. So if you notice on the last resume example, let's find her. She has something here called career overview, where she presents herself. Some people call this a professional overview or a description or a bio, but it's a few sentences where you can write something that you really want them to notice. This resume, she just wants you to really notice the duties that she's good at. So she's mentioning that I manage secretarial duties, I maintain inventory. Other people like to kind of, I would say, summarize their entire profile. So they might say, I am a multifaceted communications professional, experienced in the design and the marketing side. So you can summarize yourself as if you're in front of someone in the interview and you're pitching. You would put that right at the very top in the professional overview section. I'd also like to highlight for you guys that the order I put these in is the order that they should appear in. Contact information should be first. Professional summary should be right after. There's no point having a summary somewhere else on the resume. It needs to come before I read the rest. Numbers 3 and 4, this is work experience and education, and those can reverse places, and I will tell you why. Depending on the job you're applying for, you need to assess what makes you a stronger candidate. Is it your educational background or is it your work experience? So the example I gave earlier of someone who wants to work at a hotel, I believe that their experience is probably the most important thing. Like, let's say they worked at a clothing store in the mall. So they served a lot of customers. They had a lot of face time. They had to be very organized. They had to take inventory. They were responsible for money. And their degree, maybe they went to Buzarea and they studied English. So I'm applying to a hotel. I have a degree from Buzarea and I worked in a retail environment. If it were me, I'm going to put the job, the work experience first, because the rule is that where it is on the page, the higher up is the most important. So this person says, yes, my work experience is what really, really qualifies me for the role. So I want work experience first, and then I want them to see my degree. This is especially important when you're applying for a job that has nothing to do with your degree. So imagine you have a degree in marine biology and you're applying for a hotel position. So you don't want to put marine biology right in front of their eyes. You want to put something else more relevant first. Now, in the same example, let's say I'm still that student. I'll be Amirda. I went to Buzarea. I studied English and I've worked at I don't know, a clothing store in the mall. Then I have a job, let's say it's still a hotel job, but they mention in the job that they really want an English speaker. It's an international hotel chain. They are really short on staff who can speak English. They're really searching for, and maybe the title of the job is even English speaking receptionist. Well, now I might put my education first because I see that the fact that I know English is probably more interesting to them than my work experience because they're really looking for the qualification that I have from my education. So that's why I say you should reverse these. You should always assess based on the job you're applying for, which one is more relevant. Because, and not to scare you, but it is a risk that if you put them in the wrong order, and the first thing I see is that you have an unrelated degree, I might not read the rest. Every resume gets, I think it's somewhere between 30 to 60 seconds of analysis. The HR manager is doing what we call skimming. They're reading for keywords. They're going to see like marine biology. Okay. And then they might say, oh, 2 years of work experience. That's not really enough. Pass. Meanwhile, you actually have really relevant work experience that you want to show them how it could really connect to their job, et cetera. Okay, so I'm kind of talking about the next section as well, which is about tailoring your job, but this is why you need to always assess what comes first, work experience or education. Next, we have skills, which we talked about already, should primarily be hard skills. And then we have certifications. So at the beginning in the Q&A, someone said they have 20 certificates and there's never enough room for them. So I have some really maybe bad news, maybe tough love, but 20 certificates is way too many. The people reading the resume are not going to have time to read through and analyze, like appreciate the certificates. They, at this stage of a resume, they haven't met you yet. They don't know your personality. They're not sure where they'd fit you on their team. So we're feeding like little lines to trigger in the brain, oh yeah, I want someone with that. So I would always encourage you to change the certificates you mention on your resume to be the most relevant. And I advise maximum 3. It's a hard choice. It can be painful, but it shows that you are able to choose what is most relevant to them. Including irrelevant information on a CV. Let's say I'm, fluent in German and I'm applying for this hotel. Okay, maybe that's a bad example because languages are kind of always a bonus. But let's say I'm a coder. Let's say I know how to code Python and I'm applying to be a hotel receptionist. They're not very interested in that. It won't affect them at all. It doesn't necessarily look relevant to the job, which probably tells them that this is the resume I send to everyone. Because if I wrote it just for them, I wouldn't include something irrelevant like that. I hope you guys get the feeling of what I mean here, because now I'm like, well, maybe Python is always useful. All right, I'm going to read some chat questions here. All right, let's go to the Q&A. I want to see if there's anything. Okay, so Salman is saying I've never heard about references. So I think, Salman, you're probably talking about the fact that, in our example, CV here, and I'll go to the big picture, you can see that she included a reference on her resume. So this is someone who, her name, let's see, we are now putting ourselves in the shoes of Adeline Palmerston, who's a fake, I think, AI-generated person on the internet. So Adeline is handing out her resume, and she has the name of a former boss and her email address and her phone number. Basically saying that you can call this person at any time and she will validate that I did the work I said I did, that I was on time, that I was respectful, that I was a good employee, etc. So normally in the job search process, when you are at the very final stages of getting a job offer, they will ask you to send them references. And these are former bosses, former colleagues, former project managers who can vouch for you, who can say, yes, this person is a valuable employee. They're not lying on their resume. Everything they say is true. And I believe they would be a good fit on your team. So it has to be someone you've worked with who really values you. And if you have never worked before, it should be a former professor, or let's say possibly a former classmate, teammate, ideally someone slightly older than you, so there's a sense of hierarchy. If you volunteered in a group, maybe the volunteer manager, but you should never include family or friends. It should be someone who's known you in a professional, or if there's no professional context yet, academic context. If the question is, do we need to include references? I say no. References are optional. I actually don't love including references because I have so much to say that I don't have room for references. I want to talk a lot about my professional background. So this is a good option for someone who struggles to fill the page. Look how much space that took up. And it still looks like she has a lot of experience, right? She doesn't leave any empty space on the page, which is very important. So that's when I think writing a reference on the resume is a good idea. Let's see, for work experience, can we add volunteering? Okay, good question, Sharifa. So you can add volunteering. If you do not have work experience, if this is your first time applying, then yes, you can put your volunteer experience in the work section simply because you're trying to fill it out. And everyone understands that. Everybody was young once. Everybody was applying for their first job once. So go ahead and put that volunteer experience in work. But the thing is, you need to clarify that you were a volunteer. You want them to know very clearly that you were volunteering. So you can even put in the title, let's say you were a, gosh, I don't know. I know there's some associations that have like memberships programs. So maybe you were a membership manager, or you were helping recruit people to volunteer. So make sure when you list your job title, you write volunteer membership manager to make sure it's very clear to the HR manager that you're talking about a volunteer position. And when they do a reference check on you later, that they don't feel surprised knowing, oh, actually, that was only a volunteer. If you have professional experience and you don't struggle to fill out work experience, so basically, if you have at least 2 paid professional experiences, then I would put volunteering in its own section. That's option 1, where you actually have a new header that says volunteering, or you can put it under, let's say, I want to say skills. You can title the skills sections skills and interests. And then you can put in there, active volunteer in like animal rescue association, things like that. Okay, Manel is asking, should we use general or academic English while writing the CV? I would say business English, which is a little bit between the two. It should not be as almost flowery is the word I want to use. This means kind of the language is a little beautiful in academic language. The sentences are very long, probably less flowery than academic, but it is still formal written English. And for that, I would call it business English. Yusuf has a great question. Should we put the experience chronologically? Yes, you should. It's called reverse chronological order. So the most recent experience is at the top, and you go down from there. All right. I see more questions coming in, but you guys, I want to keep heading on into the next section. For the person asking about references being important, they are not important. You do not need them. Okay. I'm going to come back to this later. Let me check the other chat if there's anything. Waleed is asking, what about the type of resume? Ignore what they're saying, that there's major differences in the resumes. There are not major differences, at least not in the content. The one big difference with an American resume is we do not include any personal information. No picture, no date of birth, and no marital status. We find it very odd as Americans to know if the person applying is married. That has nothing to do with their ability to do the job. So if you're applying to an American company, just reduce all of the information that's personal to you. So that's your date of birth should not be there, your photo should not be there, and whether or not you're married should not be there. Other than that, the content of the resume, the work experience, the education, all of this is the same across European and American. All right. Let's see. Manel saying, doesn't the structure matter as much as the content? Yes, I would say yes. In a resume, you want to make sure that you have a very well-structured document because, again, you only have about 30 seconds to 60 seconds of that person's time. They may not read every sentence. They may just judge you off of the structure and a few key points that they find. So you do, when writing a resume, need to focus equally on what you write as well as how you present yourself, which I know is not so fun. It's like, can't people just hire me based on who I am and my skills and how amazing I'll be and how motivated? But then when you think, how will they ever get to know that? How will they get to assess that? What we have distilled down to is the resume, and that's what we're working with here. All right, guys, we're going to move to our next section. This is my question for you. I'd like answers in the chat, please. Should you use the same resume when you apply to different jobs? So we're going to use my example of an English major from Buzarea. She has a job to work at a hotel, and she has a job to work at, let's say, food, like a catering company, where they prepare food and they bring for events and they do the setup, people who come and serve. Should she have the same resume for each position? Why or why not? Tell me. I see it depends. I see no, 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 nope, no. I see here actually, Yassine asking the same question I'm asking, which is it necessary to make a resume for every job you apply to? Hakima is saying it depends on the type of work. Okay, Aya is actually saying, or Hadil is saying it's actually better to use a different CV. I don't think so. Abdullah, you're right. He's saying you already answered this. You actually already said you should change the resume for the job position. Well, very astute, Abdullah. I did a little bit ruin my own question. So here we go. The answer is no. Every resume should be tailored to the job you are applying to, but it is not a complete rewrite. I don't want you to lose all your hair starting from zero with every single job at the same time. It is equally a waste of your time to send the same resume to 100 different jobs without making any changes as it is to sit and rewrite from scratch 2 or 3. The same amount of time is spent, and a lot of times with the 100 sent out there, they're all going to say no because it's not specific to what they're looking for. So why do we tailor our resumes? This is me again ruining my future points that are coming up. So I said HR managers are looking for candidates that are familiar with the industry and the company. That point I didn't ruin, but the next one I did, which is on average, a resume gets 60 seconds of analysis. You need your relevant experience to come first. So this one, I think I explained plenty, but let's go to that first one. So HR managers are looking for candidates that are familiar with the industry and the company. So let's say you're working in the petroleum sector. It means that you, as an HR manager, you see a lot of engineering resumes. You're very familiar with the types of experience an engineer has. You already are familiar with the types of degrees and programs that they have come from, because you're always hiring from the same types of places. So if you're a candidate who's interested in entering that field, and maybe you didn't go to one of those schools, or you have an unusual background, and so your resume is in a different style. I don't mean different content. I mean, of course, if the university is different, the content is slightly different, but I really mean different style. So you're from outside of the industry. Let's say you include colors, like you put blue and orange. And meanwhile, all the other engineering schools have trained their staff, has trained their students not to use any colors. So you put colors, you use different fonts. Let's say you're putting it in a different language. You will stand out as someone who's unfamiliar with the expectations of the industry. In fact, when doing resumes, I like to tell people there's no bonus points for standing out. It's a sad thing to say, because usually we do want to stand out and be individuals and be recognized for our personalities. But when you're submitting resumes, when people are, when the HR manager is reviewing them, if it feels like everybody knows the expectations of the resume, except for one person, immediately they will see it and they'll say, oh, they don't know what they're doing. Simply because the resume wasn't matching the industry. So there's a few different ways you can consider industry. I'll put it in quotes because it's actually broader than that. The first one we talked about a little bit, which is nationality, country expectations. If you're, let's say you move to Canada and you are submitting your CV for jobs in Canada, and you didn't take this amazing class with me, so you didn't know that nobody else is including their picture. And actually, the story I'm telling you is true for me. When I was living in the US and we reviewed, in my case, it was applicants for interns. Every time we got an application with a photo on it, in a whole pile that had no photos, and one pops up with a photo, it's like a shock of, oh, they don't know what they're doing. They didn't know that we don't do photos. And that is already information. I'm not even going to read the rest of your resume, because I know that you didn't Google if we take photos or if we like resumes like this. I know that you are unfamiliar. So immediately I'm thinking, they don't know the custom. Are they going to take longer to train than someone else who already knew exactly the type of resume we like in this country or in this industry? So this is part of the reason you really want to make sure you do not stand out for your structure or for your style. So that example I gave is country specific. I tried to give one that was kind of industry specific with engineering. Another thing you can think about is the actual position you're applying to. So if you are applying for a design or marketing position, the design of your resume will be evaluated, because the let's say job interview or the assessment begins the minute they look at it, not when they start analyzing the content. I would say for me, I read a lot of resumes for English teachers because we hire English teachers at the school. When I see a resume for an English teacher arrive in French, I don't consider it. And I know that sounds really harsh, but I need to have someone who can submit, not only is capable of submitting their resume in English, but who has done the thinking. They thought to themselves, well, I need to prove that I can write a resume in English. I need to prove that I have a high enough level of English fluency to put together my resume. They're understanding that the assessment is beginning from the minute they send in their materials. And sometimes I feel really harsh and sometimes I feel unfair, but I want to hire the teacher who thought in detail about my experience as the person receiving the resume. So when I say tailor your resume, I am talking about the actual words that you write, but the first thing you need to consider is, are you matching the expectations of the job? So an English resume for an English teacher, French resume for a French teacher, German resume for a German teacher, these things, very well-designed resume for a design position, etc. Am I tailoring it for the industry? Kind of what are the types of resumes they see in the petroleum industry? How do people typically apply to these online remote startup jobs? And then, of course, the country requirements. Although this might sound a little bit sad because it feels like the bar is so high, and if you slip up a little bit, you won't be considered, I just encourage you to see the opposite perspective, which is everything I'm telling you is on the internet. So you can Google, what are typical resumes for Facebook? Hey, I want to work at Facebook. What are some resumes of people who work at Facebook? Now we even have AI. We can ask ChatGPT, hey, what are the kinds of things that people mention on resumes for startup jobs? Hey, what are the kind of things people mention on resumes at petroleum companies or resumes at, I don't know, marketing firms? So this is something that adds an extra layer, but it's not unachievable. You can do the extra work that will set your resume above the rest. Okay. So here are some tricks to stand out. And this is actually also how I'm going to answer the question of, I think it was Sammy, someone asked about, or maybe Yassine, someone asked about how do you get past the AI? So a lot of jobs right now are using AI to sort through their applications. And that's very common for companies that receive tons of applications. And it's also very common for public agencies like governments or government affiliated bodies that have to prove that there's no corruption. They want to prove that we really only took the candidates that hit our qualifications. There was no marifa, there was no, special favor. And very practically, it would be a waste of their time to review 10,000 applications. So they are using AI to simply go through every single resume and check to see if the person should go in front of the human, the next step, which is human eyes. So here are some tricks to get through. Number one, if the job description requires 3 years of experience, you absolutely have to list 3 years of experience on your resume, because an AI bot or machine will throw it out if you don't match years. This is where I would say add in the volunteering experience, because the AI will not be able to decipher if it's volunteer or not. You just need to get it through to the other side. And as a disclaimer, I don't guarantee that what I'm saying will get you past AI, but it's some tips that you can try to see if it helps you get in front of the interviewer. So make sure you match any numerical requirement. If it's number of years, if it's number of customers served, if it's number of projects managed, you cannot have less than what they indicate. If you have less, it's not worth your time. You will not get through AI. The next one, and this is what I actually have in my slide here, which is to analyze the job descriptions and use the exact same vocabulary in your resume. And then I wrote, trust me, they won't notice. So let's say they ask for someone with experience managing multifaceted teams. That expression feels kind of like, well, I can't copy paste that. So I'll write, has managed different teams before across different cultures, et cetera. You're kind of describing what they wrote, which is experience managing multifaceted teams. Well, the AI will not necessarily match what you have said to what was in the job description, and it won't know that you're talking about the same thing. So in fact, even though it seems silly, I recommend that you use the exact same phrase. Don't pick the whole sentence, but take the exact phrase if it's, let's say, 4 words or 5 words. You can say, experiencing managing multifaceted teams across various projects while I was at X company. So you take the first part of the phrase and you put it in your own sentence. But it means that when the AI is scanning your document, it's going to say, oh, they have what we're looking for. Because as of right now, these chatbots or these AI systems are not advanced enough to necessarily detect when your phrase or your expression should match with what's in the job description. Furthermore, I actually think this is something you should do even when you're putting your resume directly in front of a human. So at American Institute, for example, we do not use AI. We read the resumes that come to us, but we still read so many resumes that oftentimes we forget exactly the phrasing we used in our job description. So I could say, what's something we put in ours? Like, time management skills, ability to manage different types of students, ability to adapt teaching to different learners and their needs, something like this. If I get a resume back that says to me, ability to adapt teaching to learners and their needs, I will not automatically hear myself. I will simply say, well, that's exactly what we're looking for. The human memory is not so good. Certainly mine is not so good that I will remember my exact phrasing. But when you feed it back to me, I will love it because that's exactly what I wanted. As long as you are not doing a huge copy and paste for the whole resume, then this is something that I really encourage you to do, whether it's for AI or whether it is for a human in front of your eyes. All right, next, I already talked about at length, which is reordering your education and work experience sections. This really will help you stand out. If your education has nothing to do with what you're applying for, keep it at the bottom. And that's the case for many of us, where what you studied in school is not the type of work you want to do. So you keep it in the resume to prove that, hey, I'm qualified, I got my bachelor's, or I got my master's, or maybe I got my second master's, my PhD. I know you guys Algerians have such high levels of education. You want to include it, but you don't want to lead with it unless it's directly related to the work you'll be doing. The last trick I have for you to stand out is to rewrite your professional overview section. So that's the optional section that you don't have to use, but I do encourage you to consider using it because it's usually just one sentence, maximum two. Do not make this a whole paragraph. This is truly like if you as a human had like a tagline, hey, here I am, and you should recognize that I'm strategic project manager with experience in the tech and design fields. It doesn't even have to be a complete sentence. What I just said was what we would call a clause. There was no verb there, but I'm telling you, the reader, exactly what skills I want you to focus on, and that you are literally putting that in their head when they read the rest of the resume. Even if you have unaffiliated education or work that's unaffiliated, I will think about tech and design because that's what you told me to think about. So these are 3 tricks that I wish I saw more in the resumes that I got. I hope they're helpful, you guys. All right. So before I go into the discussion and into the Q&A, I see a lot of activity, which I love. I want you guys to read these. It's the same person. And I know they're long. I apologize that they're long. I want to know which professional overview they should use for which job. So we have A and we have B. So in A, I'm just going to read it out loud. I'll read with you. Their professional overview is a versatile professional with a marketing degree, seeking to leverage a strategic marketing background and customer-focused mindset in contributing to the success of the hospitality industry. So where do you think this resume is going? What kind of jobs do they want? Hotel service. Awesome. Digital marketing. Oh, okay. So Manel is saying A is more like hotel service and B is more like a data analyst. Okay, so let me read B. So B, we say analytically minded professional with a marketing degree seeking to apply quantitative skills and data analysis expertise to drive informed decision-making in the field of data analysis. I see you guys choosing A or B, which one you like more, but actually these are both good. They are just for different jobs. So what you can see here is this is someone with a marketing degree. They have a marketing degree and they have some kind of work experience. But instead of pointing out their exact work experience or their company, they're highlighting skills that they've earned. So in A, We have someone with a marketing degree who says they have a customer-focused mindset. That's a great phrase. A lot of you guys can just use that. These are the good things you should fill in your resume when you haven't had that much experience. If you've ever been in a customer-facing role or even like in a volunteer association, you can say you have a customer-focused mindset. It's unprovable. These are the kinds of wordings that you should put on your resume that will make you sound better. I realize I'm saying these things on a recording where I'm telling you all to say customer-focused mindset, but resume language is naturally elevated, and this is a perfect phrase. The next one is still someone with a marketing degree, but this time they're talking about quantitative skills and data analysis. So we know that they're interested in something quantitative, something analytical, something with data, maybe a desk job, whereas the other one is certainly a client relations or a customer service job. This is, again, what I'm telling you, this is the same candidate. If you are only going to edit one thing on your resume when you send it to a job, edit this professional overview. Because again, as I said a second ago, you are setting up the reviewer to analyze and interpret your resume differently. If I read B, then I'm reading the resume, and the things that are going to stand out to me are about data, are about numbers, about quantitative work, about projects. If I read A, then I'm going to be scanning your resume for customer service experience, times that you handled conflict, times that you helped resolve issues. So you are really in charge of dictating the perspective of the person who's reading. Okay. All right, highlighting achievements, or the big question, what do we actually write? So up until now, I've basically talked about structure, layout, strategies for what to mention. But now here's actually the hard truth of what you have to put in the resume. What is the content? I put here on the side, again, this is the copy paste from the same sort of fake resume as before, not because I think it's beautiful language, but because it's the right amount of information. So under every single job, you need to have three key things. Number one is your title. What job did you do? Number two is the location. Was it in Algiers? Was it in Blida? Were you in Tiaret? You need the location of work and the dates. Were you there? It should be the month and the year from August 2020 until October 2021, for example. Those three things are a minimum for everything that is considered work experience and also for education. Education, you should have the degree, the location, and the date that you graduated. Underneath every position, you need to put at least 2 bullet points about what you did. Okay, so you were an office assistant. What does that mean? An office assistant in one company and another company can have completely different types of responsibilities. So you need to detail in a short way, a succinct way, what your responsibilities were and what your achievements were. Here are a few tips. Unfortunately, this is where we could spend hours and hours and hours, and I love to do resume writing, and I could talk to you guys for hours about how to phrase things nicely and how to add certain words to stand out and how certain things sound better than others, but we don't have time for that today. So I had to limit myself to these 3 tips. These are tips that you should use when you are writing the content, the bullet points. Number 1, make sure your achievements are specific. So if you're talking about, let's say, an office assistant job, and maybe you changed how the system recorded new customers. So every time you're working in a hair salon, every time a new customer came in, it used to be done on a notebook, and you moved it all onto the computer. So you need to very specifically describe what that achievement is, not simply say updated processes. Okay, and I'm saying you need to because otherwise it will not be recognized for the value it was. So instead of just vaguely saying made a better process, specifically say moved the entire company from a handwritten system into a computer-based one, allowing for data tracking, retention analysis, etc. Okay, you need to specifically say what you did and don't be shy. The next is to use metrics and numbers to demonstrate impact. So this is something that everyone can do, and I don't see enough. Actually, What are the number of people that you served? What are the number of projects that you managed? If you'd worked in sales, what is the number of the sales revenue that you had in a given year or in a given month? This is something that is really easy for a manager to catch, an HR manager to catch when they're reading. It calls the eye. When I see a metric, I always read it. Let's say I'm reading my teacher resume. Tell me how many students that you taught in your last school. Tell me, if you designed lessons, how many lessons you designed. There always, no matter what the job, there's always a few things we can quantify with numbers. And the more you can have those, not the whole thing, but the more you can have at least one quantitative bullet point, the more impressive you will look. The last one is connect the work you did to the overall success of the company. This is something that I wish my Algerian students did more. And I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I come from a culture where we brag. We are braggers. The American culture is everyone brags about themselves. We elevate our achievements. We take credit, even if we did very little. And I believe in my 5 years of experience that Algerians are the opposite. There's a lot of humility. There's very humble people. They'll say, no, it wasn't just me. It was a whole team effort. And humility is a wonderful asset. It's something that has inspired me. It's one of the reasons I love living here is that I'm around very, very humble people and humble community. The hard part is that on a resume, you cannot be humble. Because you're not in front of someone. You can't say humbly, it was a team effort and I led that effort, and you explain it. So a resume, you don't get to explain it. So I have to encourage you to just embrace that little bragging voice that's inside and try to take the credit for the role you played. I'm not telling you to lie. I'm telling you to understand what your value was to the overall success in the company. So the example I give here is, quote, contributed to the success of our new sales strategy by tracking all relevant data. So the job of the person in the resume was data tracking. And sure, they could do a bullet point that says tracked data. It doesn't look very inspiring. It tells me that you have a skill set to input numbers into a machine. But if you demonstrate in your resume that tracking data was connected to a bigger strategy, that you were an integral part of improving something or of helping something succeed, I also believe that you weren't just putting in numbers. You were engaged, you were thinking, you were strategizing, you were part of a team, and you understand that you were part of a team and you saw the success you contributed to. I will also value more that experience when it's written in that way. This is what I always plead to my Algerian students, which is just please brag a little bit more. I've never met an Algerian student, at least of mine, who is bragging too much. And to me, it makes me smile because when I edit resumes from other cultures, sometimes I have to say, like, this is too much, guys, tone it down. And Algerians, I'm like, tone it up a little bit, just up a little. All right, let's keep moving. We're on the last slide before Q&A, you guys. So I know we have about 20 minutes left and there's a lot of questions and I'm ready to answer them. I'm going to get into the Q&A. I'm going to get into the chat. If we have time, we can get some folks on audio. But here are the do's and don'ts. And this does talk about ChatGPT because I saw those questions coming in. So do's. I'm just saying it on repeat tonight, but do adapt your resume to each job you apply to. Adapt the order, meaning the layout, what comes first, second, third, and adapt the content. Next, search online to improve your resume and match it to the job and industry. So don't sleep on Google. I know it sounds obvious, but you can actually learn a lot from other people who have applied to similar jobs. You can find resumes, you can find advice. There's actually a website that it's not active in Algeria, but if you're ever applying for a job abroad, you can find reviews not only of the people who work there, but they can tell you about the interview questions they got. So you can prepare for an interview from this website. If you're applying for an international company, you should definitely check this out. I put it in there. I wrote glassdoor.com. I don't know what the full URL is. I'm feeling very old right now, but it's called Glassdoor and it's 100% free to join. And that's the kind of thing that can really help you improve your resume and improve your interview chances. Another do is to brag about yourself. Don't be afraid to inflate your role. I said in parentheses, within reason. Do not lie. It is never worth it. Nobody wants to hire someone who is seen as dishonest, and they will often do reference checks. So you don't lie. You simply inflate your role, or you use sort of higher language to make yourself sound important. And to be honest, that's expected. Everyone is doing that sort of self-importance in resumes. And by not doing it, it might look like you just have that much less to brag about, which I know is not the case. Okay, don'ts. Don't use the same resume for many jobs. We've discussed. This next one, this is the only time I mentioned ChatGPT. I wasn't sure if folks were going to ask about it. So it's interesting to see that that is on everyone's mind, which is don't rely too much on ChatGPT. The tone is easily detectable. So I actually love using ChatGPT for resumes. And even when I'm writing emails, I find it really helpful. But ChatGPT should be seen as, and any AI tool should be seen as like your assistant. They send you something for your consideration, but you do need to consider it. One of the things that's very common with ChatGPT, and maybe I'm sure it will become more advanced and maybe I'll become obsolete and we won't need these classes. But for right now, ChatGPT is producing language that's way too formal. It sounds formal. The adjectives are too highbrow, meaning too fancy. So when I get a resume or a cover letter with ChatGPT, I can almost always tell. I don't mind, but I immediately know that this resume or this cover letter isn't showing me the actual skill, the English skill, because of course I'm assessing English. And so when I get ChatGPT, I go, okay, I won't find any grammar faults, but I'm also not learning as much. So when you use an AI assistant, you want to do your best to make sure the other person can't tell. And so with ChatGPT, try to tone down the language and the fanciness that they're using to sound slightly more human, slightly less fancy tone. And then the last thing I put for don't, which is just a little nudge to remember that this entire course is about how to apply for jobs, and applying for jobs is not writing resumes. Resumes are one piece. Most jobs, I would say 80–90% of jobs, also want a cover letter. Even if they don't ask for a cover letter, when you send an email with a resume attached to it, the email body itself is a version of a cover letter, and it needs to be something that you put thought into. I can't tell you how many times I've received resumes as attachments to empty emails with empty subject lines from folks that I don't know. So you cannot just do a resume and assume that that is fine. You need to have either a cover letter with it, or a cover letter or a shorter email in the body, as well as a professional subject line. And then I wrote they might also want references and interviews and many other elements. All right, guys, we are at 8:15. Oh, shoot. Okay. Okay, questions are next, but I forgot one last thing, which is basically a slide where I tell you to not have typos. Please, please, please do not have typos. So proofreading a resume is 100% necessary. Many American companies will throw out an application if they find a typo or a grammatical error. It sounds mean, it sounds harsh. It is the culture of American companies. I think European companies are more forgiving. Anyone in an international environment, so let's say you're applying to a German company in Algeria and the resume is in English, they're going to be way more forgiving because they're doing their work in multiple languages. But with AI, it is so easy to make sure there's no typos that for me, I find it even less understandable. Run your documents through AI, copy paste them into ChatGPT and say, are there any typos? They can tell you, yes, there's a typo in sentence 3, or there's a missing comma. When I say typo, I don't even mean a word that is spelled wrong. I mean a missing comma or a capital, right? Like the university is not a capital M or a capital U. That is considered a typo. So there's a lot of attention to detail on these tiny things on resumes. And I am so sad about the times people just don't get consideration simply because they haven't proofread. Okay. Amazing. I think I've talked enough for one evening. Let's see what you guys have to say. I'm going to go into the Q&A. I forget where I stopped. Sammy's asking about my degree. So actually, I went to 2 universities in the US, Colorado College and Georgetown University. But my degree is the TESOL certification in English teaching, which is a 120-hour English teaching certification that actually we offer at American Institute. So excuse the little plug, but I'm very excited to be a trainer for this degree. And that's what certified the work that I do today. Does the region or country matter while preparing a CV? Manel is asking. Manel, I hope you see, based on what I just said, that it does matter. I don't know in terms of region, I wouldn't say. I'd pay more attention to industry than region. I'm going to say, does the structure matter, like columns? So there's a lot of cool CV templates coming out nowadays that have a different format than the kind of the boring one, the one I showed you, which is all white and everything is horizontal. The resume format you're seeing, or I'm seeing more of, is that on the left-hand side, there's a long column, usually with colors. And in there, they'll have like language skills, professional overview, contact details. And on the right hand, they'll have work experience education. For me, it's not my favorite. I am very boring. I like the most boring versions, but it's fine. The most important thing you need to pay attention to is that there are no errors and that the format is consistent so that you don't have one paragraph that, let's say, ends here and the next paragraph, the words end here. Those kinds of inconsistencies matter a lot more than what structure you pick. So pick a structure, commit to it, and make sure everything is lined up perfectly. Sarah's asking, is the picture important in the CV? As I said, for European and most Algerian CVs do have pictures. American ones do not have pictures. Manel saying, what's the thing that attracts the reader's attention the most in CVs, especially American ones? Again, Manel, I'm going to talk about those keywords. So it depends on what they're hiring for. If they're hiring for someone to do, let's say, secretarial work, I better see the word secretary in your resume because I am searching for the word that relates to my position. So your question is something that is going to change for every single job and not so much for the country. Omar is asking a question that I love. Thank you, Omar. Omar is saying, what should be the name of the resume? Like, what's the name of the file? I'm so glad that you asked me that because that is one of the things that I don't get enough time. I don't want to allot a whole slide to this, but something that people really don't consider is that when you attach your resume to an email, that attachment has a name. And then if I download that file to my computer, I have to find it, which means maybe I've gotten 10 resumes and each one is called my resume, resume 3, CV, test 1. And then I look and I can't see whose they are until I open them. So the most helpful thing that you can do when you send your resume is you put your name in the file. So I'm looking at Omar Lefkir. Your files should say Omar Lefkir resume. They should all say that so that the person who's finding them on their own computer can find them very easily. Thank you for asking that question. You guys can tell I love the details. All right, Lena is saying I have a translation master's degree. Should I put it at the beginning since I don't have that much experience? Again, Lena, it depends on the job. If you don't have much experience in general, education comes first. But if you have volunteer experience or other experiences that are more connected with the job, then you can put education second. Omar is saying, do we have to sort work experience by date or by what's more suitable for the job? Now, this one, let me clarify. Within the category of work experience, it must be chronological. You cannot put them out of order. When I say you can move the order around, I'm talking about the sections. You can put education as a section first or education as a section second. But within that section, you must have a chronological order. So if you have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, the master's has to be written first because it's the most recent and the bachelor's second. Okay, good. Oh my gosh, you guys have so many questions. Internships are considered as experience, which I love. I love questions. Keep them coming. All right, great. I'm going to go back to the chat because I feel like I'm abandoning the chat as I'm in the Q&A. Let's see. So Idris is saying, I'm an Algerian living in Oman. Very interesting. Working in a private school. I would like to apply for international schools around the UAE and Qatar as an English teacher. What kind of resume, as per your experience, do you think will stand out? As you know, there are many candidates. Well, I think that since UAE and Qatar schools are most likely looking for native speaking teachers, that means they're probably used to receiving British resumes, Canadian resumes, and American resumes. So I know I'm a little bit biased towards North America, but I would go ahead and make a resume similar to a Canadian or an American one, meaning not including your photo. That being said, you are applying in Qatar and UAE, so check to see if maybe you can find those companies on Glassdoor. You can figure out about other people who've submitted there. But when in doubt, I would try to imitate the candidate that you think they're going for. So if they're looking for that foreign teacher, then they'll be accustomed to receiving those foreign style resumes. Very cool. Amira is asking, can I mention professional experience that's not in my educational field on my CV? 100%. Your professional experience does not have to do anything, does not have to have anything to do with your educational experience. We all have, I think, work experience that doesn't always align. I've done work experience in program management. I've done work experience in customer service, working in a call center. Now I run an English school. So our job is really, when we write the resume, to describe to the job, to the hiring manager, how these jobs have given us skills that will make us good at the job we want. It doesn't all have to be in the same field. Okay, Sarah is a medical doctor, recently graduated. Mabruk, congratulations. And I want to apply for postdoctoral research positions in the US. Interesting. What should I focus on in my resume since I have no experience? Well, for you, experience is not a downside because a lot of people who go into medical school don't work. They go from undergraduate into graduate into residency, and then they emerge working as doctors for the first time after the end of this really long program. So that's why it's very important to know the industry. So I wouldn't worry about not having work experience at all. What I would focus on is making sure you can describe accurately your training, including your residency and any lab work that you undertook that would be connected with this research you want to do in the US. But I don't think you need to worry about experience. Just elaborate a lot about your education because that's what you'll be using as a justification for the job you want. Okay, Lilia got a master's degree in American literature and civilizations. She has experience working in the international affairs as an interpreter, but have not found a full-time stable job. That's fine. This is how we start. This is what our first jobs look like. My first job was a babysitter. In fact, my first, let's say, 4 or 5 jobs was babysitting in the neighborhood, families. Even when I went to college, I was still babysitting. Then I started tutoring. No surprise that I ended up as a teacher. And then eventually, while I was still a college student, I started teaching English. None of these were full-time jobs. It does not matter if it's a full-time job or not. What you're trying to demonstrate is that you have had to show up on time. You have had a supervisor who has had to look at your work. You have been given instructions and you have followed through on those instructions. So regardless of what type of job it is, you're still demonstrating skills that will be interesting to the hiring manager. I think that's a great way to start out on your career. Hamza's saying, what if we add a photo to the US CV? You will just stand out as someone who is not familiar with American CVs. That is the hard truth of it, in my opinion. Noelle saying, what's more relevant, 3 years experience in one company or 3 years experience in different companies? I think it has to do, your question has to do with the job you're applying for. There's no universal relevancy. What is more relevant always has to do with the job you want. So if the job you want is more connected to what you did for 3 years in one company, great. If it's more relevant to the skills you gained in multiple jobs, great. I could see either scenario working out. Okay, let's see. Driss Amani is saying, should I apply in American or British English? Either. It is not a typo. I would maybe go for the type of English that the company has. But again, really, when people come to me with these questions, I want to challenge you. what words would you be using that are different in British and American English in a resume? Because the majority of words that are different, and there are not that many, are sort of daily lifestyle words like loo, lift, flat. I suppose you could say the spelling is slightly different, like color. The word color in British English has a U, in American English it doesn't. This will not be considered a typo at all. I see people saying, Nada's asking, what if the HR can't understand English? Then do not apply in English. That's exactly the reason that you need to do your research. You want to make sure that you are applying in a scenario where someone can understand what you're saying. So if you're applying to the American Institute run by an American, it should be in English because you know that everyone there speaks English. We have immersion environment. If you're applying to a company, let's say Sonatrach is hiring English teachers, I would apply in French or in Arabic because the HR manager doesn't necessarily speak English. Their company is not, their industry is not English. So they want someone who has English proficiency, but they themselves are not in a position to evaluate that. So you do need to really consider these things when you're writing your resume. Good question. Okay. I'm back in the Q&A. Guys, I only have 2 more minutes. I'm seeing these great questions come in. Let's see. Feriel is asking, for certificates, do we just add official ones? Yes. Abdunor, what do you think about the video resume? So this is something that a lot of like new hip companies are doing where they, instead of asking for a resume, they ask for video. I think that this is really beneficial for some people and really not beneficial for others because it really allows the hiring manager to act on maybe stereotypes or bias that they have. I think extroverts are going to always do better on a video than introverts. I think if someone has a thick accent or is hard to understand or has a poor connection, so the video is lower quality, that they could be unfairly, put lower in the pile. So I would say I don't feel totally positive about it, even though I know that it's attempting to make the process more human. I can appreciate that. Okay, Labrie is saying, I want to ask about competition. I've participated in one in some competitions. Can I put that in the achievement section? Yes, and definitely do. Yassine wants to know, do you have to make a resume for every job? I think we talked about that. You need to edit it for every job. You don't need to make it for every job. And I see, gosh, there's so many questions, you guys. Oh, I see you're repeating because I'm missing them. Thank you. If you have a question and I missed it, you can add it again. Dua is saying, should we add the title under the name in the resume based on the degree or work experience? So I think what you're asking, I'm not 100% sure. I think what you're asking is if I have a resume that I write my name and then I write a title. So for example, I could write Ariella Knight, English school founder, and then I have my resume. So my answer to you is you can do this if you want to. I prefer the professional overview. So I would pick one or the other. Either you give yourself like a little title, like I see your Dua Tumi. You could say Dua Tumi, master's student in physics. Okay. But I also think that the professional overview, that sort of short clause or short sentence could provide the same thing with slightly more space for details. But I don't have huge feelings on it. Either way, we'll be fine. Abdunor keeps asking me what I think about the video resume. Abdunor, you have to listen to my answer I just gave you. Okay, and Badr is asking about platforms to look for jobs. Cool, I think I got through most of the Q&A. I'm gonna go over to the discussion and then wrap up. Salah, I am a doctoral student. I want to obtain a letter of acceptance from the research laboratory of my specialty. Good luck, Salah, and I hope these classes help. Romesa says, can we do an internship section if we don't have work experience? Yes. I wouldn't call it internship section. I would write work experience. An internship is work. It may not be paid work. It may not be permanent work, but you are still working to sort of facilitate tasks in a professional environment. So you call that section work experience. And then in the title, because you always need to put your job title, you write intern. It's completely acceptable. Don't downgrade the internship experience, you guys. Omar is asking about cover letters. We are talking about cover letters next week, you guys. I see Mufti is a research teacher at an Algerian university, amazing, and wants to apply for a postdoc in an American research center. I think the most important thing to focus on is your research capabilities because you're applying for a research position. So mention original research that you have done, mention publications. If you haven't been published yet, I would work really hard on getting a publication so that you can apply to these positions. Make sure you know what they're looking for, which largely for academia is publicized original research, and try to make yourself the best candidate you can. So Lamine is saying, do companies use software to check if we've used AI? I have to be honest with you, Lamine, I don't know. It's so new. ChatGPT is so new that I would be shocked to find that right now there's already kind of reverse technology or detection technology. But what I would say, what I shared earlier, is that from a human brain, I can sometimes tell when AI has been used. So I wouldn't worry so much about getting caught. And I would worry more about making sure that you're not just spitting something out from AI, that you're validating and rewriting where necessary. All right, you guys, there's so many messages. I can't keep getting all of them. I'm so sorry. But I will be here on Monday. And so if I didn't answer your question today, why not join on Monday? Let me show you the program. I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning. I also see some of you guys helping each other in the chat, and that just warms my heart. Thank you for being so invested and answering each other's questions. This is the, oh no, this was today's program. So this is the program, guys. Today we did impressive resumes, even though it was only an hour and a half. I hope you learned something. I hope you feel inspired. I hope you keep researching to make your resumes the most amazing they can be. Next week, we have 2 sessions. On Monday, we have cover letters, and on Thursday, we have networking, and we're going all the way through the end of the month. Don't miss out. And before you leave, I'm going to show you a page with resources that you are welcome to screenshot. If I can get to it. Voila. Oops. Go back. So websites to help you design your CV and tools to improve your CV. And you can see we literally put ChatGPT as a tool, especially for typos. Take a picture. Check this out. It'll be on the YouTube later. I hope this was useful to you. And for those who want our contact information, here is how you can get in touch with us at the school. Marhaba bikum. For the next online classes, for the online series, to the school, anytime. Thank you so much, you guys. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit in case folks are taking pictures, etc. But I myself am going to head out, and we'll close down in about a minute. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for your participation. What an amazing group, and I will see you on Monday. Bye-bye.